I'm Laura Campbell. I'm with Michigan Farm Bureau and serve as one of your co-chairs for the council here. If you'd like, what we'll do is we'll go around the room and do in the room introductions, and then we'll make sure and call out folks who are participating online so that everybody kind of knows who's participating today. Do we want to start over in the corner there with you, Ben?
Sure. Ben Terrell, Michigan Farm Bureau.
Megan Napier, APT Fearless.
Rex Vaughn, Michigan Lakes and Streams Association. I'm here as Dave Maturin's alternate.
Frank Edawagisha, Executive Director of United Tribes of Michigan.
Jason Walther with Walther Farms, representing agriculture and Cassie.
Kelly Turner with the Michigan Potato Industry Commission. I am Jason's alternate. Maggie Tisley with Michigan Environmental Council. Emily Fiddle, Office of the Great Lakes Eagle, and I'm here as James Hood's delegate who'll be absent today. Bruce Alexander with Eagle. Brianna Hamilton with Jekyll.
Jim Mellon, Eagle Water Resources Division.
Austin, New York, you go.
Doug Needham with the Michigan Aggregates Association.
Joel Hunter, ECD.
Pat Staskevich, American Water Works Association. Dave Hamilton, retired from the Nature Conservancy.
Mike Ellis from Bar Engineering, Caitlin from Proxy for today. Ross Halmer, Eagle.
Megan Cameron, Eagle. All right, thank you. Just a quick check from folks online. You able to hear okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up or?
Yep.
All right.
Here you go.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so online, looks like we've got Anna Clark, Jeremiah Asher, Simon Belisle, Margaret Bettenhausen, Bree Hammond, Meg Cameron, Daphne Saxon, Dave Maturin is participating online. Dennis Ayat, Dwayne Loper, Evangelina, Sydney Hart, Ross Helmer, John Yelich, John McGee, Michelle Nightingale, Mike Ellis, Lena Pappas. Just a second as my screen's loading the rest of them. Paul Sachs, Steve Kohler, Todd Feenstra, Tom Frazier, Tyler Sackett, and Austin York. And we just had somebody else come in. Abby, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Abby Eaton, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. Thanks. We were just going through introductions, so you came in at perfect time. All right, is there anybody I missed? Anybody online or in the room that I missed? All right, not seeing any. Okay, well, hey, since we have quorum today, the nice thing is that we can do not only official approval of our agenda, but also approval of minutes for the past few meetings that we have not had quorum. So first of all, I'm going to ask if there's anything that anyone needs to add or any request for changes or edits to today's agenda. For those participating online, you should be able to find our agenda both on your screen as well as on the Water Use Advisory Council website. Any recommended edits, changes, additions? All right, seeing and hearing none. What I'll do now is we'll start with the most recent set of minutes from our meeting in February.
You need a motion to adopt the agenda.
We usually run by consensus unless there's significant adoption. If you'd like me to go through the process of a formal motion and acceptance, we can. I am happy to have stuff run as you guys would like it to. This is your council. It's not my council. So, so traditionally we have tended to do this just by consensus, but I'm happy to, we don't have formal rules on that. So I'm happy to change it if folks would like. Thoughts? No?
I'm not advocating a change.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. So let's go to our meeting minutes that were sent to you in draft form from February. Any edits, changes, additions to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Yeah.
got just one change for the Water Conservation Efficiency Committee update. And just checking with Simon to get the page number, but under that update in the sentence, it says another large focus this year is education and outreach. Just strike the text types of water stewardship after that. And I,
Types of water stewardship.
and I
Okay,
just continue with the rest of the sentence.
okay. Bree, you got that?
Yep.
All right. Perfect.
So the sentence says another large focus this year is education and outreach, just strike types of water stewardship.
Okay,
Thanks.
any, yeah,
I'm not sure timing wise how we want to clarify this. We weren't notified until February 20th that the appointments from the Senate Majority Leader had gone through. But technically, since I went through in December, as at the February meeting, I know I would have been listed as a member, not just an attendee.
okay,
So
okay, let's go ahead and update that as well. Thank you. Any other edits or corrections from February?
Can I just get a name that way I know to,
Megan Napier,
thank you.
sure.
All right, I'm seeing none online. Otherwise, is everyone good with the minutes as corrected from today for February's meeting? Not seeing anyone jump up and down in panic. All right. Bree, I'm gonna need your help here to figure out how many meetings how far we have to go back for quorum. December, I think we did not have
Don't think
in-person
so.
quorum,
When
correct?
I don't think so either.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. One of the reasons I was here in
Did-
December.
Let me double check.
Let's double check.
Work was held.
Okay, okay. So just the one meeting then. Okay, not too bad then.
Did we approve the December meeting minutes?
Oh, that's right, because we didn't have quorum. Thank you. I knew there was a reason why I had to do something here. All right, so we had quorum in December, but we did not in February, so we still have to approve December's minutes. There we go. All right. Any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes from December? Which we did have quorum, but did not get those meeting minutes approved.
Sure. I make a motion that we approve.
Second.
Yeah, all right. Any objections or concerns from December? I'm hearing and seeing none. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Okay, so we've got agenda minutes. We'll move on to public comment. And as most of you are familiar with, we do 2 public comment periods. The first one, we try to have be on agenda items for today's meeting. And then the second one, at the end of the meeting, we can hold for basically anything that might be of interest to the water council members or that people want to bring up, but isn't necessarily related to today's agenda. So any agenda related public comments that anyone would like to make today.
Okay, thank you.
And don't forget to either unmute or raise your hand if you're online and participating.
Rachel
Alright.
Proctor's on her way down.
I'm sorry.
Rachel Proctor's on her way down for the record.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Did everybody hear that online? We've got another person who's joining us in the room, Rachel Proctor. And not seeing any request for public comment, we'll jump straight into committee chair reports. Knowing that Brian Burrows isn't here today, Megan, are you able to handle an update from the data collection committee?
Yeah, I'll get something really brief, and if Jim wants to chime in, because I actually missed the last meeting, that'd be great. So the committee did meet about 10 days, I think, after the last full meeting here, February 23rd, they met. The topic of discussion was a request for proposal for long-term data planning, and the work that that committee needs to do to support that project, as well as I think a discussion on overall data collection coordination. And Jim, I did actually miss that meeting. So I don't know if there's anything that you want me to highlight from it. Your choice. That's put you on the spot.
No, but the scope of work for the draft, the 2020 recommendation to identify data gaps and prioritize filling those gaps, that will be discussed at the next data collection committee meeting when that's scheduled. So Water use staff drafted a scope of work, sent it to Brian and Megan for their comments. Brian provided his comments. We basically had us based to that. So that edited version is going to go back to the committee for discussion in the committee.
Yeah, we do have a poll open currently for our next meeting, which is looking like, I think based on Brian's availability, the 4th week of April. I've got about 9 or so people that have responded to that poll. But if you haven't and would like to participate, make sure you do that. And if you don't have the poll, just let me know. So we'll get that next meeting set up soon to continue the last discussion.
All right. Any questions for data collection committee or anybody who wants to make sure that you're on the mailing list to get those updates and notifications? All right, thanks, Megan.
Yep, thank you.
Models committee.
All right. So we've been busy and we're getting busier. So we have the SSR technical work group is going. We're actually making some pretty good progress, I think. So we've been talking about things like interpolating lithology and what kind of data you need and how to do it, and some of that kind of stuff. I think we're very close to having something that we feel comfortable with on that. We've started talking about how long the legislature has given us to do site-specific reviews. And there was a unanimous opinion that this is a problem, but that it's not enough time for a lot of situations. And so we're trying to define that and come up with some rationale justifications to why. And then assuming that the council agrees, we could then propose something to the legislature. But again, universal agreement that there are a lot of circumstances where 10 days is just nowhere near enough time. So we're trying to figure that out because what we can propose. And then we've been getting into the selecting hydraulic characteristics and some other details there. So we're kind of working our way through the list of topics that I've given you before, and we'll keep reading and making progress. Any questions on that?
Dave, I actually have a question before you go on. Do you have any update on the work that's going on for the occupational performance test?
Actually, no. Todd told me he was going to get it to me a couple times. He hasn't, so I don't.
Okay,
Was that what the
so you're waiting for some updates from
Yes.
some group members? Okay.
Yeah. So we that's what we're doing. I think we're close, but.
Okay.
See, we finally have the Michigan Hydrologic Framework underway. I am so glad for that. It's been a long time getting that going. So we do have a work group that will be providing oversight to that. We had our first meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we will be a very active work group. So this modeled very much on how the original tool and process was developed. So there will be times where we're meeting like every 2 weeks with people that are working on it. And if that's not appropriate, it can be less, but there are times that will that frequently. The work is not only the Michigan Hydrologic Framework, which is a big thing all in itself, but also includes the Michigan Integrated Water Management Database. That was folded in there's a lot of discussion as to should that go into this bigger project that Eagle is doing, but it really doesn't. It fits much more closely to Michigan Metrologic Framework. We're coordinating with the work that's being done in this bigger project, make sure that it's seamless and will work well with what they're doing there. The 3D glacial aquifer mapping, which is using the transitional probability methodology, that has finally been, contract's been awarded in that Bar Engineering as that contract. So we have worked, they'll be working with Bar on that. That has not started yet. Hopefully that will soon.
We have a project kickoff meeting coming up on Monday, I think.
Good.
So,
Okay,
Excellent. So that'll be underway, and that's another one we've been waiting for anxiously.
okay. Before you continue, I saw that, that Yunsuk just joined us. Want to make sure, Yunsuk, that you're acknowledged for the meeting minutes today, as logging on online. Is there anybody else who's joined online that I've missed?
This is Buddy Sebastian.
Hey, buddy, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, sorry about that.
And then we're still waiting on the compiling key aquifer properties. That's gone off to a good MDTMB kind of thing, and we're hoping to get it out of there and get some work done.
Is that still looking at potential 2 pilot counties that were originally proposed?
That's the transition probability mapping. That's Calhoun. It's a different.
Yeah, so that's the one that is
Okay.
is underway. Will be underway very shortly. No, the key properties are the sortivity.
Yeah.
And the transmissivity. Looking at that statewide, should we change methodology with what we're using?
Okay.
So that's a very important one that we would like to have done as soon as possible.
I'll be touching on that briefly during the program update.
Excellent.
Okay.
So otherwise, I've got a lot going on, and we will continue a few other things that we've kind of left in the back burner. We'll be bringing up to the front burner so we can get proposals ready for the annual report. Any questions?
Questions for Dave? All right, thank you. All right, new topics committee.
Update on that. So there are a couple of items that are kind of working their way to the front burner. Preventative measures in general. Jim had brought that up, and so I haven't reached out with Jason to form a group yet, but that is still out there. I'm a little reluctant to get us going off in another direction before we finish the report, so I'm kind of determining when best to introduce that new topic. And it also involves the subtopic of aquifer recharge. So I've got a manual that I've purchased on that, and I'm doing a little research on it. It's a bit of a complicated solution. But hopefully we'll have an opportunity to get some folks together to talk about those 2 items. Because preventative measures are allowed in the statute, but easy to say, what does it mean to do? So we'd like to kind of get together and start talking about that. And then I guess the last item was the MSU Water Users Committee study. MSU was hired by Eagle to do this study on water users groups. They have a guidance document that they've been working their way through. They were hoping to have some pilot groups at the end of that. Unfortunately, that wasn't successful, and now they've kind of run out of time and money to convene those, but nonetheless, they're gonna share the information that they did gain from that process, and work on getting that final report done. I know Jason was hoping that maybe we could get into the weeds of some of that, but I don't think that this is the appropriate venue, so I'm happy to give you an opportunity to talk when I'm finished. But we don't have MSU to, share their side of it, so I really don't want to get into a back and forth about the failures of that process. Hopefully, we will have an opportunity here when that study's done to reconvene as a group and get into the weeds. And then at that point in time, maybe it'd be appropriate to share some of the frustrations with trying to get through that process. So with that, I'll give you an opportunity to comment.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, at 50,000 foot view, I think it's worthy of the group knowing here that, I mean, we had farmers show up for an initial meeting. Some questions and concerns were brought forward. Two different groups, and they turned out to be pretty similar, what both groups had. And then when we were working towards the agenda for the next meeting, the concerns that we had raised were not going to be addressed. And so we felt like it was not going to be good representation of our interests. You know, if we went forward without those issues being addressed. So I think the weeds maybe is getting into those issues, which
Right.
I respect your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
You know, if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards, I can explain that, but that was ultimately the, you know, so.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
And the two groups did write some letters. and
Yeah.
so we can share those if anybody is interested. Emily, do you want to add anything more on those lines?
I'll just clarify that this was a co-funded project funded directly through University of Michigan Sea Grant. So it's not actually Eagle that's the grantor for the project with MSU. We gave money to University of Michigan, and then they administered their competitive research grant program that they typically do every 2 years. One of them is an integrated research assessment process. The other is sort of traditional research. So the Water User Committee project is funded through University of Michigan Sea Grant. And then grant is to the project team at Michigan State. So there's a couple of layers there. You know, we just want to make sure we're like, go green.
If you can.
We can be house divided here. It's okay.
I am a divided house now. My daughter might be them in a minute. So I just wanted to clarify that just for the notes in terms of the funding. And then, you know, just to say that this was a significant investment of tax dollar resources, over $400,000 into this project. And we're continuing to work with the project team to make sure that we can get results and final reports and project deliverables that will still help inform as much as they can the learning process that, you know, this project was intended to be about. And also just want to mention that, you know, the pilot water user committees were intended to be sort of mock exercises, not real, you know, tabletop exercises to actually resolve any existing water user issues or water use issues in those areas. So, you know, again, the purpose of this was to help the department and water users and the council learn about how we could successfully form these water user committees and help us develop some tools that would help all parties be able to take those steps forward. So we're going to try to get as much as we can out of the project that still helps us inform future discussions and look forward to bring the new topics committee together when we have those findings to talk about the next steps. I can't give a specific timeframe on when the project will be completed. We are doing an extension, but just with issues that have occurred, we're looking at probably still the end of the year. There's still a lot of work to do with the guidebooks and putting together the findings and summarizing what they developed in the water user surveys from last summer.
Can you give us a better idea of like the timeframe? Because it seems like the time frame and really being able to address the issues to get the farmer groups information, the time frame seems to be kind of the roadblock that we're bumping up against. Is there a possibility of extending that time frame so that those issues that were addressed can be addressed and then more information can be gathered? I feel like it's a critical piece of information that's going to inform this. Like, we want to make sure that these guidebooks have the information to create successful groups going into the future. And if we weren't able to do that in the mock exercises, and we're not including the farmer's voice, I feel like that's a big gap, especially if we're spending that much money of taxpayer dollars. So is there an opportunity maybe to extend the time frame with that and work through the issues that they identified and then to be able to incorporate that for a better outcome or a more complete outcome?
I think the issue that exists is not a time frame from the funders' perspective. It's a time frame for the growing season and when the growers were going to be available to actually participate in the process. And then for the project team to be able to gather information from that, to be able to refine the guidebooks and finalize them.
There is an advisory committee that does have brewers as part of the advisory committee process. So that group will be reconvened. They've been meeting periodically throughout the project to review all of the guidebooks and provide feedback. So we're meeting with the project team on Friday to kind of talk about where to go from here. But a tremendous amount of time and resources were put in by the project team way beyond what we provided in funding for this project to try to successfully convene those groups. And at this point, there aren't financial resources available or time to be able to put more time and energy and seasons and past for that to happen. So I think, the point that we're at this point is trying to be able to see what information can be gathered in draft forms, at what stage will those deliverables be, and how do we pick those up as a council and project team and new topics committee and figure out how we want to move those forward. So I think that's, our best hopes in mind at this point with what we were able to accomplish. There is a hard stop for the federal funding for sea grants. So that is next year, at the end of January. So that their grant can't be extended beyond that time period.
January 20.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is. That is the determining factor.
Right. Right. Yeah. So they're 3-year grants and they're part of a large omnibus federal grant that Sea Grant gets, part of a 5-year grant. And it's just, that's kind of their cycle. Our funding is possible, it's able to be extended further. But again, we ran this through the peer review process for Sea Grant because they had a well-established, very, high integrity process for doing these. It's much more rigorous than I think what we're able to manage at a state government level. And there's external state, peer reviews that are done. No one in the state is part of that peer review process. They try to make sure there's no biases. So we're confined based on that Sea Grant processing.
Thanks, Emily.
So quick question regarding that, whether it's with project team or with new topics committee, I wonder if there's an opportunity when you guys meet to kind of, go through either postmortem or, or to review what materials the project team is able to come up with. Is that something that's able to be shared with the rest of the council members so that interested folks can participate in that?
Yeah,
I just want to clarify your question, Laura. Are you asking if the rest of the council can be a part of the advisory committee?
No. Just whenever you guys have a meeting, whether it's whichever one's appropriate, whether it's the project team or whether it's the new topics committee to kind of discuss, hey, here's what happened with the project. Here's the product that we came up with as a result. Here's the feedback we're seeking or, and have that discussion. It might be nice to make sure that information about that meeting is available to everybody who's on the council so that folks who are interested can listen in and
yeah, thanks for clarifying.
provide that feedback.
So Emily did a great job of cleaning up after me as far as who's the owner of this. So U of M does have a process. So they have reconvened their group that they've convened to provide input. And so, as far as the council goes, we kind of have to let that process go through. And at some point, if they feel comfortable in sharing drafts, I'll make sure everybody who wants to sees those drafts, but eventually we'll get to a final copy. And when we have a final copy, my thoughts are we should reconvene a group that is interested in this topic and dive into the report and the recommendations. And it's certainly, there's an opportunity for us to have our own tabletop exercise. That nothing precludes that. So we can take the lessons learned from this latest experience and try to build upon that. This is all an exercise to keep everybody out of court. So I know some of the issues are raw, and that's probably why things worked out the way they did. But we're going to learn more about how the state views watersheds, and we're all figuring out what these next steps are. So I'm hopeful that this report will move us forward on this topic, but there's still going to be a lot of work to do.
And I'll just add, I think we learned a lot, through this process already. And so we really need to give the research team an opportunity to be able to frame those issues that they experienced through the project and put that in writing so that they have an opportunity to convey it, from their research team perspective. And then be able to see that in a comprehensive report and kind of take that in with those findings. So Adam, who's leading the project, Dr. Zwickel, is teaching at the same time as the water supervisory meeting, so he's not in position until the semester's over to really be able to be here. So as we know more about exactly what the next steps are and how we're moving this forward to try to make sure we get the most out of all the learnings and findings of the project and keep providing updates. Like I said, we're meeting on Friday. The advisory committee meeting will be scheduled soon. I don't know when that's on my calendar. It's been scheduled yet. So several more steps in the process, but
Who's on that advisory committee? I don't remember. I'm curious.
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, Ben's part of it. Pat is part of the advisory committee. So
I think that fall the.
Frank, I think you're part of the advisory committee. It's about 15 to 20 different interests and groups. We have a project leadership team, so Water Use Program, Abby, Jay Wesley has been part of, Jim and Andy, and Chris and James Clifton and I have been, part of that project team. So we have several sort of layers of touch points and making sure that we're trying to get the project to meet our needs, the broader needs. But we can share that list. It's available. I don't remember everybody's names. We haven't met for a while. And just as part of this project too, not just with it wasn't just the pilot water user committees. There were several tabletop exercises that were held, including the advisory committee and some other growers were invited to those last year. There was a lot of follow-up with that committee that needed to get input before they even wrote the guidebook. So there was a lot of work done before they even got to the point of trying to identify water management areas and made these pilot blocks that went into the materials and products that they're using. So this has been, it's a multi-year effort. And prior to that, several discussions with the advisory committee members and, lots of folks have individually been trying to provide advice and perspectives to the project teams.
I know both groups still are interested in participating. As far as the concern at time, if the concern at time is the growing season, that I think is an assumption, because I was never asked, and I'm pretty sure other farmers were not asked if, we can work out calendar in spring or summer. So I just share that we believe that it's a good process and an important process, but it shouldn't be rushed, and that's how we felt. So there was issues that we felt like we needed to address and that we weren't going to have time to address.
I appreciate you sharing your comments.
Yeah.
Too. And it wasn't, I don't think it's just the season. I think it's also just the time that the research team needs to, this isn't their only project. And I know that this has been a lot more time, like
Sure.
significantly more time than they budgeted for themselves in addition to teaching. So I think they're trying to make sure they have enough time to be able to develop some strong written materials, but
It just seems some of our talk was if 85% of the impact, the user impact is going to be on agriculture, that it would make sense to make sure we take the time to do it right. And if we're trying to do a mock, we really want it to look like what it's going to be in the future, and that's not where it was headed. So anyways.
well, I'm happy to share that feedback with the project team. We definitely had some conversation about would it be possible to create some type of tabletop exercise or just hearing, I think more from the team's perspective that they're running out of time.
That's
where they can.
And from my perspective, I speak on, I enjoyed the team. I thought they were extremely professional. They listened, they were taking notes. I enjoyed them quite a lot personally. So I think it would be fantastic if we could complete the process. But from my perspective, this group should know that in order to get a product that's not going to be rushed and therefore not be representative, that we would need to ask for more time. I think that's really boils down to. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Well, that's all we have for new topics. That on to conservation issues.
Any last questions for new topics before we move on? And I think I saw Mike Frederick. Did you just joined us a couple minutes ago? Anybody else who joined us?
Yep, I'm on.
Yep, thanks, Mike. Anybody else who's joined us who hasn't been identified or spoken up yet? All right, thanks. All right, let's go on to Conservation and Efficiency Committee.
Kelly or Emily and I are gonna tag team this one because she has certain things she's master of. We'll let her talk about that.
Perfect.
I'm just
Obviously,
gonna tell me what those are right now.
it's the piece we missed, the piece that didn't make it on the slide. We continue to work through the 2020 recommendations. I'm really excited to say that we do have a May 20th start date for one of the MSU extension educators when it comes to the increasing water conservation and efficiency practices. So, it's been one thing after another. They are leaving that position open because they're
Supposed to be two.
supposed to be two. Yep, and so they're gonna leave that open until they actually have the next person that they're going to hire. So instead of opening and closing and rearranging, I think we have the right mix in place. So we're pretty excited about that. MSU is gonna work on convening the advisory committee that was in that recommendation to oversee this project in May as well. So we've got person starting and the advisory group lined up for that. Over the, oh, good. And Emily has a new update on the other one, so I'll let you take that one. Perfect.
Hot off the press, I just sent out the agreement yesterday for the Alliance for Water Efficiency for the water conservation EMP project. We had, it does have a March 1st start date. We had some additional forms that were required that we weren't made aware of until we were ready to send the agreement out. So we've gotten all those approvals. They just came through yesterday and I sent the agreement out. So we'll be getting that executed, and I don't expect that will have an impact on the project timeline. So very happy. We're making a job out of co-funding projects, and that's Scott paid ways to do that. So thank you, Simon. Shout out for you, Simon. Nothing has been entirely normal since Simon started any of these grants. So I'll turn back to you.
All right, we started working on 2024 recommendations, or at least the concepts for those. One of the things that we kind of pulled from the 2022 recommendations is that the irrigation pilot project of having like a mobile unit that these two new ag irrigation specialists could then kind of take on the road to really focus on helping farmers be more efficient and conserve more water through irrigation. So looking at nozzle replacements, working through a bunch of USDA programs and bringing that all together. So we kind of took a look at that and said, there were some questions from this group because we had some language in there about the economic impact that this would have and the incentive for farmers to do that. And that got a lot of questions from this group. So we felt going back and making that more clear as to why that's in the recommendation. And then also taking a look at, there are so many grants that are just now being awarded for like climate work and end of tile research and all of this stuff that we felt it would bolster that recommendation to kind of include that as part of the background and reasoning for to showcase the importance and how the mobile unit could make an impact and pull all of those things together. So we're looking at pulling that together. Frank talks a lot about the impacts of climate migration, and there's again so much information and new research that's being out there, and grants haven't quite landed yet on which research has been promoted or going to be promoted or granted the grant money. And so really looking at inviting researchers from the MSU Institute of Water Research and USGS to kind of help us gather information on this topic, and maybe there isn't a recommendation, but we feel there needs to at least be a mention in the recommendations about the importance of this topic and the different pieces that fit together. So we're still kind of hammering that one out and trying to figure out how we pull pieces together for a possible recommendation, and if not a recommendation, language we feel should be included in the final report. The last piece that we're working on is that water energy nexus. So those water conservation and energy conservation projects that are out there, and how do we partner with like the EPA Water Sense program, leak reduction, and really create water conservation coordination. And that discussion led to the possibility
several departments were like, we need someone, a person, a body, someplace that coordinates that. And so they're really kind of looking at what does that look like? How would it be funded? What would they do for a job? All that kind of stuff. So, what did I miss? Emily?
I would just add the other part of the conversation was, you know, piloting a grants program to help support and incentivize water conservation efficiency projects, implementing EMP projects and particularly targeting areas of potential water stress. So we've had a number of speakers come in and talk about water conservation efficiency practices, innovation, but also needs and the needs for resources. And we've seen in some of the funding programs that are available, there are match requirements that create some barriers, challenges for growers. So we're going to be having some more discussion on all of that together. And again, there's a lot of opportunities right now through the climate and energy programs that, and a lot of interest from our partners and folks on the committee was to really rebuild and stand up some water conservation programs and use some funding, and they're doing their programming for next year. So I already had some outreach from committee members after last week. We're super interested. So we're excited about that. And I will say, interestingly, I was at a U of M panel on Friday, and Senator Chang was speaking about some of the water affordability bills, and one of the professors in the audience, you know, raised the question about, is there a conversation happening around water conservation and opportunities to really make that part of some of those infrastructure programs that are incentivizing more efficient use of water and looking at that rate structure. So I was happy to hear that, and it's good to hear. Get me to add the great stuff now. Okay.
Before you move on to your next topic, quick question, because you mentioned climate migration, and I know when I was at the conference for the International Association of Great Lakes Research last summer, that was a huge topic of conversation, and it involved kind of a lot of tentacles in terms of provincial governments, state governments, you know, International Joint Commission, like a lot of other groups are looking at that from a very broad perspective, not just from water use, but from a lot of different angles. Are you guys discussing or thinking about kind of how the water use piece of that puzzle fits in with the larger group, or is there, or are you guys working to kind of coordinate with some of the other state regional efforts on that?
I'll take that. We've been, I serve on the Great Lakes Water Quality Board for the IJC. And I'm also on the Climate Resiliency Task Force there. And that's one of the issues we're talking about, how that is affecting water in general around the Great Lakes. And also the question of migration, there's two things that are going on. First one is that the state of Michigan's working population is declining, and it's aging, actually, people are retiring. And what's happening is they're really worried about getting more people in the state to be workers. At the same time, we have a lot more pressure with people coming in, doing remote work in rural areas and causing infrastructure issues, water, all sorts of water system issues in the rural areas. So rural areas aren't necessarily feeling a lack of people, but actually more people. There's more farmland being impacted. There's more other things happening. So this whole question about climate migration is a big issue for us. And it's being looked at in a lot of different ways that you mentioned, from different state agencies and different studies. But the big issue that I always look at is that our job is to look at it through the lens of that water. What does it mean for us, for the compounding the problems with water use? And what does it mean, actually, when you look at the study we were talking about, for what are the water user groups going to look like when a significant portion of them are rural residential people that are not farming, but they're in the rural areas. And so I think these are all things that we have to be looking at. So if you take all of that as part of an overall picture, that's sort of where we're headed without any specific points yet. But those were the concerns that I was raising as in our committee.
At a minimum, I think we're thinking about, thank you, Frank, contextualizing this in some way in the legislative report, maybe in the background introduction. We also talked about, some kind of a convening, and there are a lot of different researchers working on this. We've got the new Boundary Waters Institute, or whatever that long name is, that Drew Brittle is working on at U of M with a bunch of faculty, with some of the Canadian, research institutions, and really trying to get our hands around what research is available and what are the other research questions that we need to be thinking about. Has that inform future projects or recommendations? So this might not end up being a recommendation at this point if we can't, get to that stage, but we think it's a really important issue that needs to be expressed to the legislature and. So.
Sorry, you were gonna go on.
Oh, no, it's okay. We forgot one thing on the slide, and that was just a kind of a quick update on this year's Great Lakes and Freshwater Week, which is going to be held June 1st through the 9th. And this year's theme is focused around water and wellness and the importance of people and their connection to water and the ways that water nourishes our ecosystems, our health, and enriches our lives. And we will be having a webinar at the beginning of the week. It'll be focused on those tribal connections and how water has been important for indigenous people coming to the Great Lakes regions, or originally sort of the first sort of water people of this region. So Kathleen Smith from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission is going to be giving a presentation on June 4th. And once we get the webinar, we'll schedule that. We'll send out details. We have the exact time down. And then later in the week, we'll have a webinar focused around that water, wellness, fitness connection. A number of different speakers talking about water accessibility from an ADA perspective, and getting people with all abilities out to water and how important that can be for sort of mental health and spiritual connection. And then I interestingly met someone last year who was doing an international campaign to raise awareness about mental health and the importance of connections to water. And he actually paddleboarded across all of the Great Lakes, which is amazing, and sort of telling his personal story, talking about. His name's Michael Shorten, ironically, his water name. Very cool. I think I need to change my list to water related. Anyway, we'll have an opportunity to highlight these connections, and I'm, personally really excited about it because I think it's something that is not talked about enough, and I'm thrilled that we're going to be able to embed it in somehow. We're going to try to tie together some like 5K water related activities, fitness groups across the state. So I think that's on my to-do list. Maybe I'll be running a 5K water, half marathon, swim, paddle.
I'll take pictures of you.
But he'll be following me on a bunny. So I think those are the main updates that we have. Did we miss anything from any of our committee members? And Abby's she's gonna be with me because she's a trail runner, so she'll run on a trail by the water.
All right. Any questions for the Conservation and Efficiency Committee? All right, Implementation Committee.
So we met April 1st, and as you've heard from all the committee reports, I think almost all of the 2020 recommendations are being addressed or impacted in some way. There's either something being drafted as a proposal for grants are being issued, or something is happening. So that is nice to be able to report that all of the things, at least from 2020, are moving forward. And so we went through and we touched on all of them. So that way, when the report is going to have to be drafted, the thought was we could at least put in there that thank you for the funding. And this is the progress that we have made on these various items. However, the 2022, still waiting on funding. And so that seems to be the holdup. There's not one of them, I don't think, that's really moving forward because we need to have money in order to address those. And then as we talked about, okay, the 2024 report, since that's going to be coming up this year, it's the 2022 report had some asks for 2020 kind of continued funding for some of those items. So I think we're going to have to relook at what was asked for in the 2022 report and really ask for a lot of that in the 2024. And I think a lot of the other committees, as they've been talking, they said, hey, before we ask for or we do future direction, we need to see kind of the outcomes of what we've already had recommendations. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how robust this 2024 is, just because we haven't been able to do a lot with the 2022.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem that we got in the past with this group, is we kept adding without completing. So I guess I just want to be cautious that we make sure we focus on the tasks at hand and then build. So
Although in fairness, kind of the big money ask from 2022 was to continue the funding for Michigan Geological Survey, and that has been approved.
right, yes.
Is there a question somebody's got? I heard a voice for a minute, but I couldn't really hear what you were saying.
So we do have the updated matrix spreadsheet. I've sent it around to the implementation committee. I mean, we could make that available to all if anybody's interested. I just don't know how to do that, so. But it is out there. If you're interested in a copy, let me know and we can get it to you, or I can email it out to you.
All right. Questions for implementation committee? And thank you for taking the lead on that. I was sick at home with some kind of horrible sinus infection or something. So thank you for taking the reins. All right. I think at this point is where I switch over to Pat taking over for chairing the rest of the committee meeting, and we'll move on to our next agenda item, which will be people update.
Thank you very much. So Jim, I assume you want to take this next one?
Sure.
Zone deed watershed management area regulatory discussion. Simple.
Well, and I think that's just one of the items. It's called out particularly,
Yeah.
but you've got other things to talk about.
Right, so I will be getting to that in the program update. With that, good afternoon, everyone. This is the program update for Eagles Water Use Program. First, quick personnel note, Clay Dupree left us for a promotion to a geologist 12 in RRD Jackson District. And efforts are underway to fill this vacancy as soon as possible. Okay, now for progress update on some of the 2020 recommendations. We had a project kickoff meeting for the Michigan Hydrologic Framework and also the Michigan Integrated Water Management Database projects with MSU and US Geological Survey. And as Dave mentioned, there's also a separate oversight group for those two recommendations that's had their initial meeting. The grant agreement is currently being finalized for signatures by both MSU and Eagle. The contract for the transition probability mapping project in Cass and Calhoun counties has been signed. Barr is on the contractor for that project. Brian, as I mentioned during the data collection committee, Brian provided a revised draft scope of work, comments on the revised scope of work to Lena on my staff for the long-term data collection planning project. So we revised that scope of work based on Brian's comments, and that will be, the revised scope of work will be discussed at the next data collection committee meeting. Okay, the Eagle Groundwater Data Management System. We just had yet another meeting on the contract today. Finalizing the contract with the contractor. And that is funded, that project is funded 7.1 million out of the IT investment fund, which is separate from that $10 million supplemental appropriation that's been earmarked to implement the 2020 council recommendations. Aquabonnie, that's for those of you who don't know, that's a proposed aquaculture project in Pioneer, Ohio, just over the border. They've gotten a permit from Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Eagle provided comments in response to the public notice for that permit application. USGS and Eagle are in the process of obtaining property access to drill monitoring wells in the state of Michigan within the predicted zone of influence from Aqua Bounty. We're finalizing a memorandum of understanding between RRD and WRD to pay for that drilling. The drilling is scheduled for the second half of June. And this map, that cluster of dots in the center, that's the Aqua Bounty well field there. There's a roughly east-west trending line, dashed line across the middle of the figure that is the state line. So the groundwater model that was done for Aqua Bounty, they are predicting kind of a southwest northeast trending zone of influence. And the inner circle is their predicted 10-foot drawdown. The middle polygon there is the predicted 5-foot. And this outer circle, they did not provide a 1-foot drawdown. So that is using the TIE solution. That is a very conservative estimate by Eagle staff, how far out that extends. Those diamonds are proposed stream monitoring locations by Aqua Bounty's consultant. Aqua triangles, those are the proposed drilling locations in the state of Michigan where RRD Geological Services will go out and drill vertically nested monitoring wells. The deep well in the pair will be completed in the Michigan Aquifer. And if there's an overlying shallow glacial aquifer, there'll be a shallow well installed as well. Okay, now getting to Zone D. Before I get into future plans and current status, this slide is covering, wanted to convey that there are a number of actions that Eagle staff go through at a desktop level before to confirm whether a water management area is in fact in Zone D, meaning that there is negative available stream flow amount in our tracking database. So the first item is that we do a compliance review. So we're evaluating all the registered withdrawals in the affected water management area. And we're also looking at, is there any available baseline and or registered capacity that could be traded to help bring that back out of Zone D. And we're also looking at revising some of the properties, the aquifer transmissivity, the storage coefficient, the KVW, which is the vertical hydraulic conductivity multiplied by the stream width, making the best estimates of those parameters and adjusting the stream flow depletions as appropriate. So this map shows the locations of water management areas that, based on our cumulative stream flow depletion tracking, are currently in Zone D, meaning that they have no stream flow available, actually in the negative. This is as of March 2024. And this table lists those depleted water management areas as of March 2024. So the far left-hand column is the water management area number. Next column is the stream classification, the index flow in gallons per minute, and the current depletion status of gallons per minute, with the most negative being at the top. The middle column there is whether we've currently have installed a stream gauge by USGS, or whether we are planning to have USGS go out and install additional stream gauges. So where it says plans, that's in the works, but those have not been installed yet. Ross has a meeting, next Monday, right, with USGS to work on the next joint funding agreement covering both continuous stream flow gauges and also having both USGS and Eagle staff go out and collect miscellaneous stream flow measurements or one-time stream flow measurements at different locations. That's that next column over. If we're doing miscellaneous flow measurements, whether it's being done by Eagle or whether it's being done by USGS, some of those watersheds is by both. And whether in some of those, we have planned to go out and collect miscellaneous flow measurements. And then the far right corner column there is the reason why water management area is currently in the zone D in the negative.
Can you just give a little insight, like, into what those mean? So that I have a better understanding, like, what is it? Like bedrock auto pass correction?
Okay. So, yeah, Kelly's asking about the far right column, the reason the water management area is in the negative. The ones that say bedrock auto pass correction, when the tool was designed, originally designed, it was designed with a bedrock auto pass feature, which made a simplifying assumption that for the Marshall Formation, the Saginaw Formation, the bedrock aquifers that are in the center of the lower peninsula, the simplifying assumption was made that those aquifers are not in hydraulic connection with streams. And therefore, an auto pass feature was set up that if you were proposing a bedrock well in one of those formations, that you would automatically get registered by the tool. Well, that's simplifying his assumption. Michigan's geology is a lot more complicated, so there are areas, the Marshall area in particular, where we know that the bedrock aquifer is hydraulically connected with stream flows. So in those areas, we've gone back and accounted for those depletions, which resulted in some of those water management areas going into the negative.
Kelly, I'm not sure if you remember, but the previous council, the one that issued their report in 2014, the study came out and that topic was discussed and that council approved Eagle removing that automatic pass for bedrock because of the complication of the geologic formations and not wanting to accidentally, allow too much depletion.
Were there other situations as well where they claimed bedrock and then when it was actually evaluated, it was found to be source?
Oh, yeah, but yeah, I mean, that's a mistake in, what geologic form, that's not the same as like, we thought it was gonna be fine because it was going into bedrock and it turned out not to be, as opposed to, we thought we were going into bedrock, but we didn't. And instead we were in a glacial formation.
Lucky for me, I was not here in 2014, so
Okay.
sorry for all of you who were.
But you're not,
But I appreciate the
Yeah.
explanation. That just helps me to understand more.
okay, and then where it says recalculated depletions, yeah, we've recalculated the stream flow depletions based on the best available information. Where it says low index flow, so we did an index flow review and it came back lower than the tool's original estimate, significantly lower. There's one where the water management area was split into multiple water management areas, and then we recalculated the depletions.
Why was that split? Remember,
Not offhand, that's 1380, 883. Look at that and we can get back to you with that.
That's up north.
No, you're, the split was in 11,745.
Yeah,
That's not
1380,
north.
13883, that's the one that's in Misaki County there, Butterfield Creek for us.
745 is in Allegan County.
Let's see, the others, October to July correction, so there was an interim. Dave, if you're on the ground floor, if you want to maybe you can provide a more coherent explanation of that October to July correction. So the interim, there's an interim process from October 1st, 2008 to July 2009, when the water withdrawal assessment tool went live.
And what's the statement?
The October to July correction. So there was some interim, as I understand it, there were some interim assumptions that were made. For example, the distance from a well to the stream and well depth.
I don't know.
Okay, well, we can, if anybody's really curious, we can do the research and provide a more coherent explanation.
Because it depends on what it turns out that Eagle wants to do with it.
Well, are you saying that you used those assumptions in some time frame now to recalculate the depletion? Is that what I'm understanding?
I mean, what I remember is there was an interim period where certain set of rules, and then the final thing came to place. But I'm not sure how that would cause a
Yeah.
depletion in ID. So I don't know what specifically caused that. I do remember a transition period, but I don't, or anything that would cause something like that.
So, yeah, if there's interest, we can, I will confer with staff and
And say history, that was like
Yeah.
6 month period. Whatever it was.
so.
All right, so I just want to make sure, so so that was applied and that's what changed the depletion?
I'll give, the depletions were recalculated, so that's why it's current.
But, yeah, I guess that will definitely need to dig into some more, because I think there's legal questions too, in terms of when provisions of the statute went into effect, and when water use reporting was required to be put into effect, and when, either sort of, to use the common vernacular, grandfathered, water uses were taken into account versus when people had the time limit. I mean, just making, if there was some transitional timeline and now we're trying to go back in time, recalculate to discover that a water management area could be in a zone D. I want us to be real careful about the next steps we take on that, so that we're not running foul of the statute, I guess is more my point. Not that I think that there is, but we just want to be very careful.
I guess the point would be, even think that it might be an ARI, which would be prohibited, how we would handle it. Its history may have.
Right, exactly. And when things went into effect, and when this calculation was conducted, and when assumptions were made.
No, we'll do some deeper dives and then get back with you on that. Okay, so the question had come up before, what is this? So the water management area in question is in zone D. What does that mean? What is the regulatory impact? So even before you get in zone D, all zone Cs and zone B cold transitionals won't pass the tool, but obviously if the water management area is in zone D, then there won't be any new registrations through the tool. In addition, we aren't going to be able to register any newer increased withdrawals that would further deplete the water management area beyond its current depletion status. That being said, if there is existing baseline and or registered capacity that a property owner has, they could use some of that existing baseline and or registered capacity. They could give that up to free up water to be able to register new withdrawal capacity. So our Eagle's initial response actions are focused initially on stream flow measurements. So as I said, we have a joint funding agreement with USGS to install continuous stream gauges. And we also, both Eagle and USGS are going out at other locations and collecting one-time miscellaneous stream flow measurements, where we go out with the flow trackers generally a minimum of 3 times a year during the growing season. Some of the water management areas will go 5 times a year, so we get out there before the growing season. And then one more measurement after the end of the growing season. Repeating the slide again, so that's just to call out that there are some of these water management areas where we have plans in the works already to install additional gauges. And then also other water management areas where either USGS and or Eagle are planning to go out and collect miscellaneous flow measurements. There are several other possible future response actions that could be taken. Which could include groundwater data collection, that could be installing additional monitoring wells. Could include additional aquifer pumping tests, slug tests, collecting stream bed conductance data to characterize the flow between the stream and the underlying aquifer. Could involve groundwater surface water modeling. Could include statistical analysis of stream flow. Could also include future joint funded research projects that are joint public-private university funded projects. So those are all possible options in the future. And we need to have, I would suggest we have some deeper dives in some of the committees. Probably models and or data collection would be appropriate committees to have do some deeper dives and talk about, okay, what are some of the next steps to evaluate these zone D water management areas? Are they really in zone D? What constitutes an adverse resource impact? And with that, are there any questions?
Yeah, Jim, where you've put in the gauges, taking additional measurements. Have you analyzed any of those and how are you in terms of data?
What do you mean, Andy?
Well, how are you, what are you using that information for to determine whether there's an error and how are you analyze it to make that determination?
Well, the definition of adverse resource impact in the statute, one of the definitions is by decreasing the stream flow by over a certain percentage based on the stream flow classification. So we'd have to, one of the things we would be looking at is, okay, here's the original stream flow at time A. Now the stream flow is lower. Are you above whatever that percentage is?
Have you done that? Have you made any determinations on that? I'm curious.
No.
And I think what I would offer is models committee with you on some of that, because that is not necessarily an easy thing to do.
Right, yeah.
And I think
That's the appropriate.
to work through whatever.
Thank you. John Yellich had a question.
Yeah, I did. Jim, thank you very much for that summary. Just to go back to the Aqua Bounty project, if you could for a moment. When you were talking about the 4 drill holes, what I remember in a previous meeting discussion is that, of course, this is a USGS with Eagle RRD. My question is this: RRD has the drill rig that they're going to take out there?
Yes.
And is it what kind of drill rig is it?
I believe Rotosonic.
Okay, that's what I thought you said too. I didn't want to put words in your mouth. Anyway, and what we had talked about before is that MGS would go ahead and collect those cores when we were out there, so that we would have at least save those cores from those particular holes. My next question really is the plan to have that hole gamma logged?
I believe so, yes. We'll confirm that with RRD.
If you would, because of course, if we're out there collecting it, we do have our gamma logger, but I just wanted to make sure we were going to have a gamma log on that hole as well to go with the lithologies and other things. Okay, that was really
RRD should have their own gamma logger, but if for some reason they don't have it on site, we'll let you know so that hopefully you can have MGSs.
We need to plan that. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. We need to plan.
Commented that's the plan.
Okay. Did you hear that, John?
I thought I heard the plan. That's the last word I heard.
Alina did comment that, yep, that's the plan is to have
Okay,
RRD
great.
analog.
Okay, so then
So-
it, we're out there, we'll be out there with the boxes. And also to let you know that we're not using the 5-foot boxes anymore because they're too hard to store in core storage. So we're using 2-foot boxes and we get 6 foot per box, but it makes it much easier to handle, by the way. Those that haven't touched Rotosonic Core.
So, yep. So
Okay.
RRD agreed to, with our recommendation to, once they get done field screening and visually describing the core section, to turn over the core sections over to MGS for them to store it at their core repository. We made the same recommendation to Aquabody for their wells, but they declined to do that.
I know.
And they indicated that they would, Aquabody would be saving their drill cores on Aquabody's property.
Okay,
So
all
they
right,
may or may not make it available.
right. And logistically, we'll make sure we have the core boxes out there so it can be put into the core boxes at the time of recovery.
Yeah,
Makes it
so
easier.
we'll have
Makes it easier.
RRD will have them get in touch with you and coordinate the logistics.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Good job.
I got a notice from the tribal liaison at the Environmental Protection Agency about a meeting that's being coordinated on this issue down in Detroit. On the whole question of the larger aquifer with Ohio and Michigan. I just wondered if you'd had any contact with them at all, or do you know anything about that?
I got invited to this meeting in Detroit in May. Yeah, it's not, I'm not sure who's organizing, what it's about. I've shared it with our tribal liaison in Eagle, so
And I was invited, but I couldn't attend because I'll be elsewhere. But I made arrangements with the Mississippi Huron Band to have their environmental coordinator to be there. So I know that there'll be some tribal representation there, but I was just curious because it's not all tribes that are in this. We're just one of the multiple interests that are invited to the meetings.
yeah, so I got partial information, so I guess I need to be in
And I
touch
have-
with the
I
organizers.
probably have a little less. But I've got- Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I have one question. Could we go back to the zone D table, please? I wonder, Jim, would it be in the plan on zone Ds to put stream gauges in to all of those, or how do you decide which ones to add a stream gauge for and which ones not to?
All other things being equal, certainly the more negative water management area is the higher priority it would be. We do have, when we're planning a stream gauge, we have USGS. Sometimes along with Eagle, we'll go out and evaluate, get out in the field and look at evaluate the site for the gauge. Is it gonna work? Oh, Ross, you got anything else to add along those lines?
Yeah, there's some sites that we select and then USGS goes out there and they say, no way, can't put a gauge there. So that would be the case where we wouldn't have a gauge. But yeah, in a perfect world, we'd love to have gauges and all that.
So, yeah, so if a stream were able to receive a gauge, that generally you add it. It's not a resource issue, it's just it's a practical thing.
There is a budgetary aspect to the number of gauges that we can put in. There's practical restrictions on how many gauges USGS can put in at one time. But there's also some budgetary concerns going on, in addition to the portion of the 10 million that was allocated. We had originally planned to put 20 gauges in. And because of budgetary concerns, that was reduced back down to 12, but the $15 million groundwater proposal for change, a portion of that money is being used for additional stream characterization, so we're gonna get it back up. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get it back up to 20, but more than, somewhere between 12 and 20. Right.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm the same thing. I think we need to get through some of these and actually figure out what's the department gonna do. Say ARI is instead of saying, oh, this is what we're gonna do everywhere, whatever, I think we need to get through some of that. This is what we needed here for this reason. This is how we made the decision. And from that, we can go on to the next one and figure out what we have to do, but we need to get through some of these. The list keeps growing. And we need to get something's off, resolved, what we're gonna do.
And I remember a visit that we took several years ago to Three Rivers. And we were looking at a stream gauge, we were looking at the fields and the draw, and the area had maxed out the water pipe according to the water withdrawal assessment tool. And yet the stream flow was increasing. It hadn't lessened at all. And so what I'm wondering is there been any, we made assumptions that the stream flow would lessen when we hit the maximum use. Has that been tested to see if that actually is what's happening? Are there places where we can demonstrate that it's happened? And because what basically the people were saying is that, how can you tell us there's no more water when the stream flow is actually increasing? You know,
And Frank, the way that the law is written, it's below what it would have been. So you may go through a cycle where the water is higher, and then you go through a cycle that's lower. And you're not penalized if you're in a lower cycle, it's less than what it would have been. So you still, you know, a higher cycle, it's less than what it would have been. Lower cycle, it's still less than what it would have been. And that's why it's so hard to tease out to know where you are.
I just remembered that from that.
Yeah.
From that field trip.
Yeah, no, there's some interesting things that I think we need to dive into as to just what's going on, because there are parts of the state that have gotten wetter over these years. Is that masking, you know, a problem, or is it that there isn't a problem?
So Jim, without trying to box you into a corner, I mean, we've got 14 zone Ds, and the statute at least contemplates that if you have zone D, these are ARIs. And so what is the department doing to try to validate whether or not those are ARIs or aren't ARIs? They realize it's pretty specific in the statute, but you know, implementing that and trying to defend that is a whole different thing. So I know that's a loaded question. I'm not trying to paint you into a corner, but can you give us just some insight on what your thought process is on that?
The thought process is developing. The easier first step is to get out there and start measuring the stream flow and look at what the long-term stream flow is doing. If you were to ask me, is a given groundwater withdrawal causing an adverse resource impact, or other things that I want to look at? So what is the capture zone of that well when it's being pumped? So that probably may very well involve a hydrogeological investigation. We also include an aquifer pumping test to revise the aquifer parameters, the transmissivity and storage coefficient. How long is it going to take that cone of depression to reach the stream? Where is it going to reach the stream? And then look at, okay, what is the stream flow where you would expect that cone of depression to intercept the stream, as well as upstream and downstream of that. That's what, if I had a big pot of money, that's the first approach I would take. But there's a lot that goes into figuring out that. So we need to go back to some of the committees and do some deep dives, get input from committee members.
And I think you're probably gonna be looking at models, and you're not looking at just one well, you're looking at all of them. One match there.
And that's, you're at the zone D. We're looking at the stream flow at the mouth of the water management area. Most of these water management areas have tens, dozens more withdrawals further upstream. So you may do additional miscellaneous flow measurements further upstream of the gauge and see if you can you isolate particular tributaries that may be a problem. Then, okay, which withdrawals are contributing to that stretch? So there's a lot to figure out.
I've got Todd next and then a few. So Todd, go ahead.
Thank you. I just got a couple things. One of the ones that we've been looking at, and I'm curious, we talked about the zone Ds, but how many watersheds are essentially, one more irrigation well away, right? I mean, you'll never approve a well that would put it into a zone D. So we are catching zone Ds kind of after the fact, but we're still going to face those same problems with water users committees and basically a tangle over who gets access to the water if someone wants to come in and there's no more water available. So that would be a zone C generally. So how many of those, I'm looking at some of the numbers and it looks like there's about, if we assume 75 gallons a minute of depletion, and put that filter on it, there's about 1,500 watersheds that are one well away. So I guess I'd echo more what Dave Hamilton was saying, that we're at a kind of a tipping point here where there's going to be a lot of water conflicts. If we're one well away, that'd be an interesting number to add to your report. Your program update would be, how many wells are we close to watersheds being deemed out of water where we can't add more wells anymore. I guess the other comments that I would have would be, outside of a realistic view of where we're going to encounter problems. If we do talk about doing stream gauging and stream temperature data, both of those are going to require at least 3 years of continuous data. So when we're in a zone D situation, there's like close to 3 years it's going to take to even get some sort of resolution on that, unless we can find a different approach somehow. And then the last thing that I would say going along with that data collection, whether it's the groundwater monitoring wells, the stream gauges, or water temperature, precipitation plays a big role in that. How responsive are the aquifers to the precipitation? How responsive are the streams to that? That's really low hanging fruit. We do have the MON network, but boy, measuring stream temperature, measuring precipitation rates with additional weather stations seems to me like that would be a pretty wise thing to start looking at sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Todd. Jason, you got a question?
Oh, just a comment. Your question was a perfect question in my opinion. And that was the first priority. The biggest question that the farmers had in the water user committee was how do we validate that we have zone D? So I mean, it has come up. Wasn't going to go into the weeds, but we're in the weeds. That is the highest and most important question that the growers had. So I think it's very important that we, as a council, figure out how to address that.
So Jim, it sounds like you got some good feedback to think about. We're here to help if you want to form a committee at some point to tackle whatever you guys come up with, or what the department comes up with. So I guess with that, we'll move on unless there are any other further questions. I don't need to
I
stop.
don't have a question. It's more of a comment or something that I've been thinking. In Jim's report at the very end, you mentioned like private, public, university kind of collaboration. And I wondered if, I don't know who is part of MSU's Water Alliance, but they meet regularly and they do like brainstorming sessions on different topics. They have one for May and they're going to have 3 different kind of focus hubs. So one is supply sustainable food, water, and energy. The second is sustain aquatic ecosystems and build resilience. And the third is ensure water security for healthy people, animals, and the planet. these are kind of those big nebulous buckets that we were talking about. And I don't know if there's an opportunity to communicate with the Alliance, to do maybe a brainstorming session around some topics that would really help inform this group about what kind of research could they be doing? What research are they looking to in the future? Because they use these with the researchers to inform research that they're gonna apply for, or put together in the coming years. So I feel like this might be a connection that we wanna make. And let us,
Just got appointed to that group too. So if there's stuff that you guys want me to carry forward and propose as either discussion topics or have kind of like a joint meeting or, further action we want to take on that, I would love to do that.
Laura, our
My first meeting's gonna be May.
our committee, we reached out to Dana Infante and we said, hey, we're looking at like migration, climate migration and all different things. Like, is there a way for us to collaborate a little bit where we learn from you guys what you're interested in or what needs are out there for research so that we can provide in like our report so that we're all kind of talking the same language and pushing the same way. We haven't gotten a response yet from that, but it was just Thursday last week, but I'll make sure we start including you in those conversations.
Perfect.
Yeah, I just want to add on Kelly's comment. I mean, I think part of our discussion at the committee last week really is applicable to the entire council. That it would be really helpful as a council to better understand what research has been done in terms of climate impacts, demographics, water use trends. And there's a lot that's happening. The regional body and the Compact Council Science team has been having presentations by different USGS regions and other researchers and bringing that more to the full council here and informing our work that might, then parlay into additional discussions within the committees versus, us just having this conversation as the Water Conservation Efficiency Committee.
Well, this came up at the end of last year and then again at the beginning of this year, folks who want to bring up special topics have either research or case studies or anything else that you want to talk to. Bring those to Brian and Pat and me so that we can make sure and schedule time in for them. And I will be sure to follow up with the Alliance and see if there's any opportunity to do some idea sharing there as well. So yeah, absolutely. If you're aware of some stuff that the Compact Council, regional body, IJC, any of those folks are talking about or research that they've been reviewing that we need to see, definitely let us know. Thanks.
All right. Anything else on that item? Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the update. Now, I love the Freudian slip on this next one. The Water Use Advisory recommendation budge update. So this one, Laura, I think Dave Maturin was gonna try to budge on some folks.
Yeah, and Dave, I don't want to put you on the spot here because I know Brian Burrows was gonna connect with you and have some more discussion on that, and I don't know if that happened since he's not here today. Do you have an update that you want to provide on that or any additional information from your conversations with him? And you've got to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Hey, here we go. How's that?
There we go. Now we can hear you. Thanks.
Brian and I had a discussion and it was a worthwhile discussion. I've got an avenue I'm looking at right now, and if that doesn't work out, then we'll take a look at other avenues to pursue. But it's in process right now, and hopefully I can report something in the next couple of weeks. So.
All right, sounds good. Ben, I don't know if you can kind of maybe just do a quick summary of some of the updates that you've been providing kind of internally to our staff in terms of the schedule for the legislature. Like they're back, but they're not really doing anything yet because special elections and all those things.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anybody's not following things every day in Lansing. There's not been a lot of activity recently, right? Had this tie in the House of Representatives for a while, based on the two members that took mayoral positions back in the fall of last year. So special election for that is actually coming up on the 16th of April. And so it'll usually take 5 to 7, 10 days to seat those two folks. And then sort of the assumption around town, you know, kind of putting the caveat out there, the assumption that those probably move pretty expeditiously on the budget after that. So once those folks are back, they'll move on the budgets. We'll have some more committee hearings. We'll have the May consensus revenue estimating conference, and then, you know, we'll have some more specific budget details, and probably those will move, you know, relatively rapidly after that. Be done, you know, around that sort of June 1 timeframe. The legislature's always heading now. Obviously, that's kind of the best safe scenario we'll always see, but I think
Is it
that's,
June 1 or July 1?
you know, and we'll see what they're able to do, but I think there's, I don't know, I love other perspectives. I think there's a lot of thoughts that, you know, there's not a ton of new stuff in this year's budget. You know, it's pared back a little bit from years past, and seems to be kind of a little more baseline than some of the really big budgets we've seen the last couple of years. So I think that's what I can provide, but anybody else has a clearer crystal ball, feel free to chime in.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item is the department appointment update. I think we are all set, but we're not. The one I understand, the department ones are still.
And I can give it up.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So the appointment letters are in process. They're obviously not going to be done by today for the voting members by the director, but I think they should be out by the end of next week. So that's for Charlie Scott, Steve Kohler, and Becky Kinsley. And then James did confirm internally that we don't need to sort of officially appoint the non-voting members, but just to confirm with those agencies, those individuals, that they're still going to be representing. So I have some emails out this week, and I'm just going to try to circle back to see while James touched base with last week. But on that list was I confirmed Jay Wesley again for DNR. Jim Johnson's retired from AmDARD, so I was going to reach out to Mike Alexander. Sammy is.
I sent a note to Jim and Sherry.
Okay, perfect. John Yelich, Margaret Bettenhausen, and then you, Chris, and then James. So that's the update on those. So everything should be wrapped up within the next week.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, we've got some meeting dates coming up, and I guess the one that I wanted to bring your attention to is August 13th. That was when we were hoping that we get an anticipated list from the committees on what they expect to have in this next annual report due at the end of the year. So we don't need the actual full recommendation, but we'd like to have a placeholder so that we can start to work on the draft of that report. So if you could do your best to put some focus on that and have some draft, recommendations by that time, that would be appreciated. You realize some other things may pop up, but if it's just one or two, it's a lot easier to deal with and hold their report. So appreciate that.
And since we've got some folks who are a little bit newer to the committee, this seemed to work well in our last couple of reports, is that once you guys have kind of the rough language, any kind of graphs or additions or appendices that you want to attach, you want to send those to the implementation committee. We'll take a first stab at writing up a complete draft of all the recommendations and kind of putting them in order and doing a summary. And this is this is the total amount that we're asking for, and and that sort of thing, so that the whole council can review it. That has seemed to work pretty well, and it has streamlined the process a little bit. So if you guys are comfortable with that, we'll plan on continuing to do it that way. And that's why we're kind of asking for, in anticipation of figuring out what needs to be included in this report, we at least want to get your list. What do you think is your committee is going to have in the 2024 report by that August meeting? And then hopefully by September and October, we're finalizing those recommendations, making sure they have council consensus, and they can be added in full into the report. So that's kind of the way we've done it before. And if everybody's still good with that, and I don't hear any screaming and shouting and people going, I really want to write the report, which I'm going to bless you if you do, but I'm not holding my breath for it.
No one made eye contact.
Yeah, everybody looked down when I said that. we'll plan on continuing to do it that way, because that seemed to work well, and, you know, it turns a big slog into less of a slog.
Thanks, Laura.
Mhm.
Wait, go ahead.
On the, appointments, one of the things that we kind of held off on is making sure we knew who was going to be on the council. I think we know that now. So I think the question was, is there training or background information that new members need that we should make arrangements to? So like explain the tool, explain the process, other things that we might want to do. So I think we should figure out what those things are and schedule.
And would I be so bold as to say that you would volunteer to help do that 101? So it's definitely worth your time if some of this stuff is still Greek to you. So I guess if you could reach out to us, if any of the chairs, we'll put you on a list and get you connected with Dave.
I found it helpful, because I was like sitting here, like, I don't even know what they're talking about in the first meeting, so thanks for putting all that.
Feel your pain.
Yeah, so definitely connect with Dave, I found it helpful.
And we do hope, to continue the great quorums that we have. So we would just continue to ask, if you can't be here, please try to get your alternate to be here. And we're happy to get some business done today. So I guess with that, we do have formats on this kind of as a standing issue. I don't know if there's anything new to talk about that. Go ahead.
This is on the meetings. I've helped arrange meetings in northern Michigan a couple of times. And I'm wondering if I want to try to do that again. Something that people would like to. Northern Michigan is anywhere from Mount Pleasant to the Upper Peninsula, usually in the middle of the Lower Peninsula somewhere. But if there were any issues or things that people think we ought to meet for, or I'd be glad to do what I could to help arrange a meeting in the summer there, so somewhere out there.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And I was just gonna mention, if anybody has an interest in hosting the meeting, if you've either got a location or you got something in particular that you want to show people, or even if it's just, hey, I've got meeting space and I don't want to drive, so I'm gonna offer to host a meeting. Believe me, I've done it before. Let us know, because we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I think we've scheduled Constitution Hall for all of these dates, just in case, but
This is our backup.
yeah, but I'm also sure that folks would be glad to cancel this room too, if somebody else has an interest. So, yeah, if you think you'd like to host somewhere up north, or if you've got an idea that you want somebody else to look into, or just, volunteer somebody who's not in the room. Just let us know.
Great. We've touched on quorum. I guess the last item would be the officers for the Water Use Advisory Council. We've had some internal discussions about, what that process should be. We're certainly open for having some sort of deliberation on that. We were waiting for these appointments to be done. So I guess ready to call the question here shortly, but do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, and one of the things that we wanted to be sure, because we want this to be an inclusive process, right? So we don't have any bylaws really for this committee. We run it, as you've undoubtedly noticed, as loosey-goosey as possible, because the less rules you have, the less you have to maintain all the time. But if there's a process that folks would like to see in a more formal way, if you want us to write up a procedure and have it brought to the council we're happy to do any of that stuff. In previous councils, and again, this doesn't have to be the way that we do it now, but just so that folks know for history, in previous council, we've just pretty much held a consensus vote. People have said, hey, we want to make sure that we've got representations from sort of the different interests that are around the room. A tri-chair sort of structure representing agriculture, business, and environmental / conservation interests has worked so far. But again, we're open to either other ways of being able to vote for leadership, or to write up a procedure that people would like to see in place. So I think maybe that's the discussion to have first before we jump right into, hey, who wants to put their name in the hat to be in charge of this
Yeah, thanks
hat
for
herding exercise?
framing it, because we had 5 at one point as far as the executive group, and then, so, you know, I think the key is we need to have more than one, because situations happen where you need to hand off the reins, so I would say 2 is the minimum, 3 seems to work. And I guess, you know, if anybody feels strongly about trying to pick leadership by who they represent versus who's willing to volunteer, you know, I think that's a good, healthy discussion to have. The original iteration of this was really more the department bringing folks together, and so they had a little bit more direction on how they wanted that to occur. But after this was put into the statute, it's really not really well defined. If you want us to work on rules, you know, just some basic structures of how we plan to operate, we could put something down on paper, but we haven't done that today. And so as a result, we come up with situations like this where we got to talk it out.
I for one think that the 3 has worked well, because if one can't make it, there's still at least 2 to share the duties at the meeting.
Right.
So I think that seemed to have worked really well for this last time. So I would support doing that again.
I agree.
And I'm not certain that we necessarily have to pick by sector. I think it's more who's available and able to do the work. It's been nice if it's divided up a bit by sector, but I think that makes a big difference to have that availability and then also institutional support for that person. Because some of us, like me, I'm a staff of 1 for my organization. So that's it, you know, and so it makes it a little.
Makes decision making easy.
Oh, yeah, it's really, delegate to myself anything I want.
You ever had a time vote?
Employee of the month. Every month, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I think that the 3 has worked really well, and I'm not sure what other people think, but that seemed to have worked out well. And so I, you know, my voice is to keep that going through this next iteration of council.
In case anyone is wondering how much work you have to do, all of the administrative, all of the lifting of the room and the technology, you've seen us stumble, right? The department provides all of that. So if you're worried that you have to do a bunch of coordinating and such, all the meeting minutes, all of that lift is done by a whole lot of people. But anyway, it's not the chairs. So I think you can say that you show up, right?
Yep.
And you talk and then you leave.
Yep. There, you know, there's some additional time into kind of meeting with the executive group, which again is a group that's fairly open for those who are interested in putting in the extra time to figure out what these meetings are going to look like, what our topics are going to be, what people have brought up to us. But it's not a huge time commitment. It is, however, a fairly consistent one. You know, if you're not able to make it to most of the meetings, it's probably not a great role for you, because then you'll be relying on your other co-chairs to do stuff all the time.
So we can go, I don't want to do it today, but I'm just gonna throw out a couple of options. We could, you know, pick a date and say we're gonna go by nominations and just go around the table and nominate people, or we could have people say who's interested in it, and we could have some sort of slate of candidates and go through it that way.
Well, maybe the first question to get out of the way is there anyone who feels strongly that we should write up a formal procedure for this? Some kind of bylaws document, before we just kind of go, hey, let's just get nominees and vote. No. Seeing a bunch of head shaking here. Nobody's raising their hand online saying, yes, please, let's make this hard. Okay, so then in that case, do we want to, and I also want to give a chance for folks who maybe weren't able to make it either in person or or need to go back and check with their leadership first. Maybe open it up to nominations for leadership between now and the next meeting. And then at the next meeting, take our consensus vote on chairs. That sound like a plan?
So if someone wants to nominate someone or volunteer, they've named.
Yes, so that we have the list, and can publish the list with the,
So they would submit to the chairs,
yes.
the tri-chairs.
Yep, and then we'll make sure and get it to Eagle so that Eagle can publish the list. Here's the folks who have volunteered their nomination. Don't nominate somebody without them agreeing to it.
No volunteer.
No voluntelling.
I just want to say, I stepped into this role, in the interim. But I am actively trying to onboard somebody else from our organization, one or two people, to eventually fill my slot. Because I think that's everybody's job on the council, is to have some sort of succession plan. So this is kind of distracted me from that. So I am gonna try to go back to onboarding those folks. So I just want to throw that out there.
So yeah, so if everybody's comfortable with that, let's plan on, and maybe Bree and Chris, if you don't mind, maybe we can follow up from this meeting and send out a meeting to the council members to, so voting and non-voting council members, not to like the whole 150 person group. To say, hey, we're accepting self nominations or nominations with permission of folks who would like to be one of the tri-chairs. And we're gonna vote on it, assuming we have quorum, at our June 11th meeting. And if we don't, it's getting put off till August.
Not seeing anybody objecting to that, so that's a good plan.
All right.
I need to tell everybody I won't be here on June 11th.
Okay.
My organization's having one of the supporter meetings, I think.
Anyone else going but you?
Pardon?
Is anyone else going but you?
For that meeting?
Is it gonna be one person?
I work for all 12 tribes. They'll all be there. I have to be there to.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just.
All right, that brings us,
I'm sorry, I want to talk about the chairs, the co-chairs of the committees.
oh, sure, that's an excellent point.
Sure. If you want to do that, we can do that at the same time. if you like. Okay. All right, so we'll make an amendment to that. We're gonna take nominations for council chairs. So we're going for 3, but as many nominations as you want to make, again, with the permission of the person you're nominating. And for chairs of the committees. So data collection, models, new topics, conservation efficiency, and implementation. Or if you've got a new committee, or if you say, we don't need this committee because I've been on it, we don't do anything. Feel free to make a nomination. But nominations for chairs, and again, we can have chairs and co-chairs. That works well for the committees as well as for the full council, so.
So just to clarify, so we're gonna send a note to the voting, non-voting and non-voting members seeking nominations for council chairs and committee chairs and co-chairs. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
I'm just curious, how many people are on each of the committees?
Officially or unofficially?
Yeah, it's hard to tell because there's a bunch.
On average, how many people generally show up for your committee meetings?
It's 10 to 25.
We're a little smaller. We get 5 to 8 usually.
Yeah, we had 10 last time. So.
We're around like 16, so.
But I consider the actual members are council members. And then the other people are part of it, so, I mean, everybody's part of it, anybody can come anytime, but I do have kind of a hierarchy as to like.
There's colored hands stained with red. Orange or something, so.
Okay, thank you. That was a good discussion, one that you did to get it going, so I appreciate that. All right, we are down to open comments. This is on anything that you care to talk about? Go ahead, Kelly.
So the Potato Growers of Michigan, they're hosting a food and facts tour on June 14th. It's a Friday. We are gonna start out at IFC Farm and we're gonna do a water tutorial. Kind of showing people the data collection that farm is doing and how they use water and how they grow potatoes, where they store them. It's like a whole facilities type tour surrounding the topic of water. We're gonna do a catered lunch at their new storage facility, and then we are heading to Great Lakes Potato Chip Company for a tour there in Traverse City, and then from there, we will also be touring the Grand Traverse Distillery, like the back rooms, like not what the general public gets to see, but IFC Farm, they grow potatoes specifically to make North River vodka, and so we're gonna kind of follow potatoes from the farm through a day in their life and where they go. But definitely talking about water in a lot of the practices that they use at the farm. So if you're interested in going, we'd love to have you as our guest for the day. Just, I don't know if it's best for you just to shoot me an email or let me know if you're interested. And June 14th, yeah, it's a Friday.
So what are you calling it?
It's our food and facts tour. So we host these generally at least one a year. Last year, we did a tour of Better Made. The year before that, we did a tour of Kitchen Farms, and then we took everybody to lunch at the Big Buck Brewery in Gaylord because Big Buck Brewery uses potatoes from Kitchen Farms to make their kitchen sink beer. So trying to make connections around everything.
What's a Traverse City?
It starts off in Kalkaska and it ends in Traverse City.
Anybody online have any comments? Go ahead.
Just on the committees, we've also got the executive. Make sure we.
Oh, right.
Include that.
Right. I mean, in addition to the
Well, but the
tribe
exec-
chairs.
yeah, the executive committee doesn't, I mean, the executive committee doesn't really have separate chairs and co-chairs. That's just, okay.
Right, so we have the three co-chairs would be part of the executive committee plus Eagle representatives. But the door's open if anybody else wants to participate in those discussions. Dave Maturin has been part of that. So those aren't meant to be exclusive. They're not super exciting and they're more administrative, so. Anyway, if you're interested in that, please let us know as well. All right, any other comments? All right, you got an hour back in your day. Hopefully you don't spend it in traffic.
That's an efficiently run committee.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
So where do you go?
Distillery.